Welcome to rHatchery.live. I'm Jose Leal, and today's guest we have Luz Iglesias. Luz, did I pronounce that okay?
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
As you know, you've met Matt, and Matt's our other interviewer, and he usually is here, but because I left him for 3 weeks as I was traveling, he's probably finding a reason not to be here. But hopefully he'll be able to join us as we've had the chance. So Luz, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can start talking a little bit about what you've done and why you're here.
Sure, I would love to. Thank you, Jose. My name is Luz, and I live in a rural part of Ontario, Canada, on a farm. And the reason I met Jose and Matt was through my work in co-management or self-management. For the last 11 years, I have worked for a company that is currently called Raise, but since 1957 was called the Ian Martin Group or Ian Martin Limited. So if people know us, they probably know us as the Ian Martin Group. We've just recently rebranded as Raise. And then to complicate things, I've also worked in some of the sub brands, like some of the companies that the parent company owns, Fitzy and Hirefly. So if you look at my LinkedIn, it's a mess of all these different brands, but I actually have just been with the same company for 11 years. And my main work there has been leading the transformation of our company from a traditional hierarchy to a co-managed or self-managed or self-organized company of some currently 450 people in the Philippines, India, Ghana, Peru, the US, and Canada. So for
So you
9
haven't
of
done
my...
much. You haven't been doing much.
I don't need to anymore because the people just make great decisions and organize themselves. And actually, that's kind of true. The heavy lifting for me is over because largely I would say Raise is a completely self-organizing company in all of our regions and all of our brands.
That's awesome. So, and how did you get there? Because that's not a typical place to end up.
Yes.
What got you there? Oh, there's Matt.
Yes,
Welcome,
there's
Matt.
Matt. We missed
Hi.
you. So it started, I think, in 2014. One of the executives at the then Ian Martin Group, I think, went to a conference, found out about Frederick Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations, and lent the CD version of the book or some interviews related to the book to my business partner, Edwin. Edwin and I were building a small startup called Hirefly, later called Fitzy. And John gave us that content and said, like, this is really weird. You guys might like it. And Edwin and I and the 4 other people that were working with us in that startup that was owned by the bigger company, we read the book, the original longer version of Laloux's Reinventing Organizations, ate it up. At least Edwin and I, but I think most of us had the experience of, this is something we've been looking for our whole working lives without knowing it existed, like without having this vocabulary, without realizing that somebody out there was discovering these ideas and naming them and organizing them. This is what we've been longing for. And we quite literally, the 6 of us, got in a room and said, do we want to do this? Yes. And where should we start? Let's start with self-organization. Laloux says there are 3 breakthroughs in these types of progressive organizations: wholeness at work, so like human wholeness, self-organization, and evolutionary purpose. But self-organization is sort of the mechanics of it. So we decided to start there, started replacing our decision-making architecture, gave up positional authorities. So even though we were a team of 6 people, 3 of us were managers. So there were 3 people who had managerial oversight over 3 other people. Like, that's how ridiculous, even in this small nascent business, there was already like so much hierarchy, so much structure. So we got rid of that, replaced it with practices. And eventually the parent company got interested in that work to the bigger company. And we've since acquired some other companies. And so keep spreading those ideas so that more and more people can do what we think is really meaningful work, can experience freedom and responsibility at work in a new way.
Wow, that's awesome. Because I mean, the reading of that book is where most people in this space have really sort of woken up to the possibility, and to
most young people in this space. Us older folks were inspired by a different book.
Maverick.
That's right.
Right. Yes, and now I recommend your book, and I'm this is not a paid advertisement. I recommend your book alongside La Luz. I really think Matt and Jose, you guys have made a very significant contribution to the Teal literature, co-management literature, for at least two reasons. One is that I think your book is unique in making the connection between, I'm going to just keep using the term self-organization because it's the most natural for me, and co-ownership. And the other thing I love about your book is that you're not dogmatic about using any particular method to implement these principles. And that's, I think, directly related to the topic that we chose together. We at Fitzy, Firefly, Ian Martin Rays we never used Holacracy, Sociocracy, Nair. We never used a consultant, a teacher, nothing. We had the book and some internet research and our own naivete and enthusiasm, and we just figured it out. And I think there are pros and cons to doing it that way versus doing it, having some external thing, product, or person to help you. So that might be, I thought that might be a rich topic to explore together.
Absolutely.
Well, having somebody who has had experience and has stumbled through the many opportunities there for stumbling is valuable. So they can say, oh, that's a stumble, but not to prescribe what comes after the stumble. What are you going to do about that stumble? And the usual thing is, oh, we'll go back to fiat. No, okay, relax. So that is useful. That would be useful to have. And by the way, so you came with Edwin and those people?
Edwin and I built a startup business owned by the Ian Martin Group, starting in 2013, I think. And it was in that little startup business where we started incubating what became our own homegrown Teal operating system, which I think we'll put links to in the video. And we often get interviewed together. This might be my first time being interviewed without him, but Edwin was really he's the creative spark, the visionary, the big dreamer. And I'm the boots on the ground, but what are we actually going to do? This doesn't work. This is better. Let's try this. Let's throw this away. The sort of more grounded one. And that worked well for us, having both of those tensions or both of those values present in our experimental work.
He's no longer Ian Martin, right?
He is. He's building, I don't know, complementary adjacent businesses. So he's still part of the ecosystem, but out of the day-to-day Ian Martin business.
So the work that you did at what is now Fitzy, but was something else when you first started, what was the work that those 6 people were doing? The 3 managers.
The business work?
Yes.
Yeah, we were building so Ian Martin Group is a traditional staffing business, typically hiring engineering and IT contractors for large organizations. And our little startup was attempting to provide a lower cost, friendlier alternative for small and mid-sized businesses that didn't need big fancy contractor programs, but they needed to make a decent hire. That's high stakes for a small business. How do you get the benefit of professional recruiters and professional recruiting infrastructure without the big price tag? And that business still exists, still employs lots of people. We're still very proud of it. We've just as individuals ended up in other roles and working in other parts of the business as a whole.
So when did you jump away from operating Fitzy and working with Ian, or pardon me, with your partner, whose name I just...
Yes. Yeah. So it was probably 2 or 3 years after doing the transformation at Fitzy that the CEO or the owner of the whole company, Tim, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, what do you think it's time for the parent company to start implementing these ideas?" And I alluded to the idea that I don't see myself as a visionary. At the time, my career dream was that some CEO owner would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I need your help implementing these radical ideas." And I would go, "Okay, here we go." It never once occurred to me that it would be our own owner and CEO. Like, I don't think 10 steps ahead like that. I just think like, in the trenches, in the work, what's happening right now. But it was our own owner that asked if I would essentially bring the co-management ideas, teach the co-management ideas to the larger business. So I've been doing that since about 2018. And now we're at the point where largely the system is mature. One of the amazing things about co-management systems is that they have evolution built right in. So anytime the employees don't like this practice or think of a better way to do it, they don't need me anymore. We have the pathways, the mechanisms to improve our own work over time. And so now I'm at a point where I can start to look at where else I might be useful, who else I might be useful to, because by and large, the system is working at Raise.
So let me ask you a question, because you said it a couple of times, you're the boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. And that one was a visionary, blah, blah, blah. So you make this distinction. So what happened to you? You read the Leal book, and that was part of it, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. But what happened to you? Where did you make that? I mean, that's a hell of a jump.
Why was I attracted to it?
Yeah.
I think that throughout my career to that point, I had experienced a lot of pain at work. I had good leaders and not so good leaders, and I had been on healthy teams and unhealthy teams. And when I was on unhealthy teams or working for people who I didn't think were talented leaders or managers, I really suffered. Some people are able to compartmentalize that and say, like, whatever, that's my job. I don't need to take that home. It doesn't matter. But I wasn't that way. I really felt those wounds of going to work every day for someone whose visions or values I didn't trust, I didn't believe in, that I thought didn't treat people well. And I think at the time I might have said, well, that's down to the person. We selected a bad leader, or that person is not a skilled leader. Now I have a different lens for looking at that. And, those people are smart and well-intentioned, but the system is set up with certain power dynamics, and it yields certain results. Yes. And it's almost like if that book hadn't interrupted my career, my thought, my ways of thinking, maybe something else would have, but that was such an interruption of, it's not that guy was a bad leader and he was out to get us and he was doing bad things. He was trying his best. He was a smart, capable person who was trying his best at work every day, but the system created such an artificial imbalance of power between me and that person, or the team and that person, or whatever, that it was just doomed to fail for someone with the sensitivities that I have around what it means to show up at work every day and how important that is and how beautiful it can be, how important it can be. So to me, there was a wound there that this work addressed in some ways.
But you discovered that it was the system, not the individuals.
By and large.
Right.
Yeah, sure. There's some bad operators, but no, I think it's the system.
Well, and we all promote the system. I mean, the system is us.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We're all complicit in it.
Yeah. We're all complicit in it.
Yeah. We can't blame it for something that we don't. We're the ones that create it. We're the ones that make it and support it and keep it alive every single day.
We're wearing these glasses. Right? These are fiat glasses. So everything we do has to be visible in this color, you know? And the book evidently did a little bit of this,
Yes.
you know, and you can see now clearly, but it tends to close itself down again. So, and that's what we have to struggle with. So we may be the pioneers,
Hmm.
but we're going to get all the arrows in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So,
And how was that process for you, Luz? Because what we call the system is the fiat system,
Yes.
and you probably didn't have a term for the system,
Yes.
but you've identified different aspects of what the system is made up of that really create the problems, right?
Yes.
When you started to identify these problematic areas, these symptoms of fiat, how did that come across to the 200, 300, 400 people that you worked with at
Yeah.
Ray's to show them these things?
That's a great question. And one thing I've learned in 8-9 years of doing this work is that I have very little influence over how another person sees the world or what they hear, what they don't hear. You know, they might read the same book and have a completely different reaction to it. I do remember one woman, one coworker, I think it's okay if I say her name is Diane. And in the very early days of introducing these ideas at the Ian Martin group, she really thought they were like, these ideas are terrible. This is never going to work. You have to tell people what to do. You have to control what people do at work, or else they're lazy and they won't get things. I mean, that's my interpretation of. And the very first thing I did at the Ian Martin group was a study group. So we would read a chapter of the book and get together and discuss different ideas and how could this work in our business. And after reading the Wholeness at Work chapter, Diane came to my cubicle in or near tears with the book open. And she said, my whole career, I've been told my feelings don't matter at work. I can't bring my whole self to work. It's unprofessional. It's bad. It's unwelcome. And she went on to describe her sort of how the book met her woundedness around that. And she said to me at the end of the conversation, you can't put this toothpaste back in the tube. Once you've unleashed these ideas, they won't go back in. Yeah. And that's my own, like, I have no idea why some people get there, some people don't, some people are attracted to this, some people aren't. But once the toothpaste is out, you can't put it back in. I think there's no way I could go back to having a fiat owner manager telling me what to do, disregarding my own unique perspective. I don't need to get my way all the time, but I want you to at least accept that I have a perspective on what's happening. And it'd be nice if you listened to it and honored it, even if ultimately we go a different way, because that's, we got to be practical. We got to make real decisions. But each of us has a valid perspective on every topic we encounter at work. So let's create a system where people can at least say, like, and that it's so silly when I say it, but it's so radical in the fiat world, like to believe that each individual has a valid perspective and that it is okay for them to express it.
Yeah. And that's fundamental to our humanity. That when you're 7 or 8 or 9 years old and you discover I, it's the first time you go, well, I don't. And then your parents will listen to you, and your grandma does, but your parents don't. And but I want to say something. I want to contribute something that may help the survivability of the community. It's very fundamental. And of course, when you're a kid, you may not be able to contribute much that hasn't been already thought out or whatever, but you have to be listened to, and you have to be taught to get the stuff out in an intelligible way and And we don't. We just say, well, kids, what is it? Kids and chicken. Oh, I'm confusing Spanish. Just saying in Spanish about kids talk after chicken's crap or something.
I don't know that one.
And
I think in English, it's kids should be seen but not
Seen
heard.
and not heard. Yeah.
Seen but
Just
not
like
heard.
employees.
Exactly.
And it's just like employees. And if I can contribute to this community, then you're not a community. You're just people that I hang out with for 8 hours a day and then go home. Interesting.
Well, and as Luz said, in the radical world, we don't recognize the wholeness of ourselves, much less each other. So if we don't think we have the room to express ourselves for who we are, our feelings, our lives, our reality, how the heck are we going to accept that from others? If I don't get to, you don't get to, right? And so we've got a system where we imprison each other, right? And it's only because, well, if I'm forced to feel this way, then you also need to feel this way. Even though I know, as a manager in Toronto, where you were born, I would feel this huge tension with the team where I knew that what they were asking for was absolutely right. It would be what I would want in that situation, but I wouldn't give in because, well, I don't get that. And I can see that now looking back. But in the moment, it just felt like that's the way it is. I'm the boss, and that's the way it should be. And it was me acting out what was being perpetrated on me by others.
Yeah.
And acting it out on them. And they on their teams, and their teams on each other. And it was this whole thing. And then when I look at it now, and you experience this having worked with different divisions all over the world, that the top dictates what the other layers are going to do. Because if I'm treated in a certain way, then I'm going to treat my people in a similar way. Right? Is that something you experience? Is that something that you can reflect on?
I think my reflection on that would be that any transformation towards co-management, co-ownership, both parties have to unlearn those power dynamics.
Yes.
People that have had power, positional power, and the longer they've had it, the worse it is. That people that have internalized that power, they need to learn how to work without it. And that's almost like you almost have to rewire your relationship to privilege, your immunity from real feedback is a big one. So if you've been powerful, you have to go to power therapy. And if you haven't been powerful, you're the little guy, you've internalized powerlessness, and or you've learned how to benefit from that. You've hidden yourself in order to be protected in certain ways in that system. And I just show up at work every day in these conflicts where, the little guy's blaming, well, the leaders suck. And the leader's like, well, the people they're not ready. And I'm like, you're perpetrating this on each other. And one or both of you has to take a courageous action to do something differently here, because you're both actually just adult human beings. You're both intelligent, whole adult human beings trapped in this
system.
Yeah.
In this role play almost.
Right.
And certain kinds of people, depending on your gender and the color of your skin and your sexual orientation and whatever, then you're piling on in either direction. And so I think there is a real intersection between this work and justice, equity, diversity, inclusion.
Yes.
That's not automatic. It's not like,
Right.
oh, if you just implement these practices, then everyone is the same and everyone has an equal voice. But it gives you the tools, I think, to start picking that apart a little bit.
Not equal, equitable. is not equal in the sense that I may say something, you may say something, I'll say something, and we're not equal. We're just, but we get to say it. We get to be listened to, and I get to laugh at yours and disregard Jose's and whatever. But we
He always disregards mine.
He always it's a being listened to. At the same time, but it's not equal.
So Carlos realized that we're 26 minutes into this and we haven't even talked about the topic. And that's because we're enjoying having this conversation so much. So let's talk about the topic.
Okay.
Do it yourself.
Yeah.
Homegrown, ready-made systems.
Yes.
What is it that you see as the benefit of doing it yourself?
Yes.
Versus these.
Thank you, Carlos. Systems? Thank you for the discipline. First, we did it ourselves out of naive optimism. I remember being aware of Holacracy, and from a distance, I'm no expert in Holacracy. I've never used it. From a distance, it seemed bureaucratic to me, so I wasn't attracted to it. And at that time, I wasn't aware of any other system. I had never heard of K2K's Nair. I had never heard of Sociocracy. So it was like, either we buy Holacracy or we just make all this stuff up ourselves. And so that's why we chose to make it up ourselves. I think the biggest advantages of that is a feeling of ownership over what we've created. Yeah. And it's sort of like when you build the computer or you build the car, like, okay, yeah, I stuck something in there and that's not a long-term fix, but you remember that. And at some point you go in, and so the builder of the car knows where the strengths and the weaknesses are, at least to some extent. And so there's a sense of ownership. There's a sense of, well, we built it, we can unbuild it, or we can improve it, or we can keep what we like and throw away what we don't like. And so over time, I think there is a stronger sense of ownership, stronger sense of evolutionary influence over the system that you have. I've worked with organizations that have implemented one of those systems I've talked about, and there's lots of advantages of hitting the floor running with something that's been tested, that an external expert can come in and say, start with this, try this, do this. Here's what other similar companies have experienced. So we didn't pick this topic to say one is definitely better than the other. But in the long term, I probably have a bias for just figure it out yourself.
Well, and about where we stand with co-management and co-ownership. Mm-hmm. Part of the ownership is the system itself. It's not mm-hmm. just owning the assets of the organization, the profits, but owning how that organization lives. If you yourself have been dictated a model of operating, then you don't own it.
Right.
And you might own the money, but you don't own what's operating. Mm-hmm. And so part of our view is that co-ownership extends to how we do what we do, mm-hmm. not just what we do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think your topic of do it yourself hits very much down our path of seeing that, at least now, as this shift away from fiat towards something more radical is happening, that it needs to be happening by the people involved. Will it become a new system that will become the norm, that people will learn in university and will go out and do it? Maybe. But we're definitely not there yet. Mm-hmm. And that ownership of that transition, I think that you point out, is a very critical part of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back off the subject for a second. And to the part of, so you read the book, you had this naive, you call it naive, I call it super wise, thing of, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do it ourselves. And you didn't choose a packaged solution like Holacracy or whatever. And I know organizations that have 47 46-page Constitution. And the problem is nobody remembers what that is. And they're always arguing about the Constitution. But so you decided to go that way. What impact did it have on you? What was, because there's something in you that's not normal. So what made that happen?
You know, one thing that's not normal about me that my collaborators in this work often point out is that I really like simplicity. Like, there are no 47-page documents in the stuff that we created around co-management. It's our essential Teal operating system, which Carlos will link, is one diagram. It's one flow chart that I drew on a scrap piece of paper, and I tacked it up in my cubicle. And I thought, oh, that's beautiful. That's so simple. They didn't at that stage have the confidence to do anything with it, but eventually I kept looking at it and thinking, that's good. And I showed it to Edwin, and he was like, that's good. You should start showing that to people and see what they think. And I took that to another collaborator, James, who's the one who he and I really developed the branching questions, and it's a flow chart. It's a so yeah, what the branching questions were and what the exact language. Did we want to talk about sensing problems and opportunities or noticing them? Is it a problem or opportunity? So we really debated every word in that one simple diagram, and it has evolved. It has evolved, and I hope improved over time. But the basic idea in our organization is that any person can notice a problem or opportunity, and then this little flow chart guides them through to our 6 common practices that they would use to address the thing that they're seeing. That's it. Yeah.
By the way, the drive to simplicity, I often overdo it, but it's something that's very much a part of the book. The radical is not radical, I'm going to kill the bad people and stuff like that. It's radical going to the roots.
Yeah. Right.
And that brings you simplicity. In my book, it brings you more than simplicity. It brings you an easy way to remember.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If you don't remember something, you can't live it. If I have to remember the 47-page commandment that came from somewhere, I can't live it. I get to page 3 and I get bored and whatever. So maybe that was the basis of it, and that's why I identify with you in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was simple, and now we can get back on the topic.
Yeah, well, I wonder how, when that OS started to emerge, how much did it physically change the organizational structure of what is now
Raise.
Mm-hmm. Blanking out. Did it start to change roles?
Yes, to some extent. Although often when I'm talking to other people who have experience of co-management, one of the things they'll point out, or I'll point out about our organization, is that our role work is probably less evolved or less advanced than it is in other co-managed organizations. I think some of that is around the business that we do. We have essentially 3 jobs: recruiters, salespeople, and the people who support our contractors. And those roles are so different from one another that it's unlikely that people will hybridize their roles. They can. The Teal OS gives them the tools to mix and match, but different people are attracted to those, like fundamentally differently skilled people, and different people with different attributes are attracted to those roles. So in terms of role distribution, actually, we're fairly similar to how we were when we were hierarchical. And that would be one, I think when people start this work, they think they have to do everything perfectly, all that. You have to do, Lily says roles, so do roles. This says decision-making, so do decision-making. And my advice would be start where your pain points are. You might not radically change your roles. You might not radically change certain aspects of your decision-making. I think I've lost track of what the question was, Jose, but I would say our rules did not radically change in the way that they might have at other self-organized companies.
Right, right. And obviously you didn't tackle the ownership issue as well.
We have a robust profit sharing program. We distribute a percentage of our annual net income to all of our employees in all regions, but we are still single owner owned. Last week, I recommended your book to our owner, Tim. So let's see, maybe I'll read it.
We'll see. Maybe he'll tap you on the shoulder.
Yeah, help me do co-ownership.
Exactly. And that's because we feel that co-management can't really be fully experienced until there is co-ownership as well. Because at the end of the day, there's always, even in the case of Ray's, a benevolent
Yes.
leader.
Yes.
But that benevolent leader something can change their mind.
Yes.
They can move on.
Yes.
And things change. And we've seen it many times where benevolent leaders, for some reason, flip, right? They sell, they move on, do something, and things don't stay as they were. And so how do you...
die.
Or they die. Or they die. I was trying to be nice and not say that Tim's going to die, but but it happens. And so do you see that to be true? Do you experience that yourself? The idea that if we long-term are moving towards co-ownership as well, that the chances that this transformation towards something more radical and away from fiat is not a viable long-term solution.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's a really significant contribution that you have made to the conversation and should continue making. More people need to hear that and consider how to make it real. And I don't know, in your worldview, if you consider profit sharing a form of co-ownership,
it's a step towards, I think, but Matt's the one that did a lot of the research on that.
The thing about profit sharing, we had it at the previous company that I had, and it went like this. My partner would call me and go, "Hey, I think we're gonna take so much for this and so much for that for next year, and that leaves so many dollars to give to people." And I go, "Okay." That was it. So the owners decided how much to give every year. We didn't have a fixed percentage or anything like that. K2K has a fixed percentage, and that's what they go by. But the problem is the owners make that decision in my behalf, and so that's not co-ownership. And the other aspects of co-ownership is that I own everything. I own the brand. I own the reputation. I own everything about the company myself. I co-own that, and that never enters into profit sharing at all. So if we said, "Oh, we're going to print profit sharing everything, the whole company, boom," and we recommend that we take 50% for next year because we have to fund next year, and people go, "Yeah, 50% is fine. 45. How about 45%? And whatever." You end up with a percentage or whatever, but so long as there's a human being, benevolent, nice, always smiling, always feeding their dogs and all that stuff, making those decisions is a fiat decision by that person. And nice that you may be and all that stuff, because eventually he will die and his children will take over the place. And they may revert the whole thing. They may say, "Oh, this is bullshit," and put it all back. So that's why it's a fiat decision. You're building wealth for a family, and no, we're building wealth for us and for this community. So,
Our practice is slightly different in that the parameters are consent based. So even the owner cannot change the existing parameters of the profit sharing plan without the whole company's consent.
oh, that's good. That's good.
And if you interview me or Tim or Edwin again in 3, 4, 5 years, I bet you will have found some doors to open to go further.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, there's nothing is wrong about any of this stuff. It's
Right.
just moving in that
progress.
direction. And we know where the path is. It's just that we can't take all the steps at once. We've got to take one step at a time. And every organization is different, and every group of individuals is different. Now, we've been 41 minutes. Yeah, amazing, isn't it? Luz, this has been a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation. Matt, did you want to introduce our guest for next week?
Yeah, let me plug in. For next week, we're going to have Fernanda Guerra. And
Guerra.
that's the English version of it. The Iberian version of it is Fernanda Guerra. And she's a regenerative practices attorney. And we don't know what the topic is, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. So that'll be the guest for next week. And I'm really looking forward to it. I've seen a lot of stuff and her contributions to other areas, and she seems to be in the right path. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Luz?
Thanks so much for having me here.
I was going to ask you, anything you want to say before we drop off?
You're doing good work, and count me in for whatever I can do to, help spread the message.
Well, we're good at roping people in, so you're roped in. Thank you again. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, don't log out.